Thank you for stopping by. This is Mr. and Mrs. V, and you're watching Love Umbrella Network.
Our mission is to raise love ambassadors and to spread love all around the world.
Yeah.
We hope to get to your community soon.
Yes.
Meanwhile, enjoy this video. We are sure it will enrich your understanding of the principles of love and of life generally.
Yeah, so let's get right into it.
Let's go.
We are talking about self-image, or I'm talking about self-image and the impact of self-image on relationships. The impact of self-image on relationships. So I would like to start by defining what self-image is. Self-image basically talks about one's self-perception, how you perceive yourself. And it's beyond physical looks, really. It's beyond physical looks, and it can simply be defined as a picture of value you have for yourself. In the panelist discussion session, someone said something about boldness for guys to approach a lady. Maybe they feel the ladies beyond their league and everything. All these things are in a way connected to self-image, how you see yourself. How do you picture yourself? What value do you have for yourself? And to save time, I think we can move to the next slide. I have very, very limited time. There are quite a number of, unfortunately, quite a number of people deal with poor self-image, and it wasn't supposed to be so, really, but quite a number of people deal with poor self-image. You can call it inferiority complex. You can call it low self-esteem. You can call it insecurity, whatever it is. Quite a number of people deal with it, rather. And it affects men and women in different and similar ways, in relationships. For instance, for men, it causes body dissatisfaction, negative body image. For instance, when you say a man that is so addicted to exercising, now I'm not saying it's bad to do exercises. It's good to exercise, to keep fit and everything, but in a bid to probably change a body part, and some of them even, abuse the use of steroid and stuff like that, just to change a particular body part. It's I'm so sorry, I was looking up there, there's on that screen. Okay, so I'll focus here. All in a bid to change a body part, and some people, they deal with eating disorder. They don't want to eat because they are not comfortable with their body shape and stuff like that. Also low self-esteem, extreme pessimistic attitude, not being confident about life, being negative about life, and seeing opportunities as strength and not as challenges to overcome to become a better person. Too much criticism, jealousy. Jealousy is really, really a big thing when it comes to poor self-image. For instance, a guy who probably sees his wife or fiancé, speaking to another guy who he feels looks more handsome than he is, tends to feel jealous, like, oh, this person is good looking than I am, and my wife is speaking to this person, that jealousy comes in because he's not confident enough even in his own looks. He's very insecure in his looks, and then being so scared, overly sensitive. The list goes on and on. You can see the list on the screen. It goes on and on. Please, you can move to the next slide. And then how does it affect women in relationship? Low confidence. I'm sorry, I'm going very fast because I just want to run through this part before I go to the main part. Low confidence about oneself and even about the relationship. Being in a relationship and checking out of that relationship because you're not certain, your confidence level is so low about yourself, or even if the person likes you enough, and just quite a number of things. And then withdraw from interaction. This is quite big for me because a lot of people take pride in being private, in quotes, but for some of them, when you check the root of it, it's really inferiority complex, fear of probably going to a ladies' hangout because you feel they look better than you, or they dress better than you, or because you don't want to talk about yourself when you get there because you just feel there's nothing so big about yourself, nothing so interesting about yourself to say. Yes, it's good to be private if you choose to be private, but then when it goes too extreme to the extent that it just needs to be checked, such that it's not because you're inferior, you feel inferior about yourself. That's why you're being private, in quotes. And then abuse, being overly sensitive to criticism, to correction, especially from your partner, from your husband, being so defensive when people correct you. Instead of you seeing it as a way of becoming a better person, you feel so defensive because you feel like you're not good enough, and then being a people pleaser, as much as it's good, or it's a good thing to be good and nice to people, when you're doing it to the detriment of yourself, well, not yourself in that sense, but when you don't have an opinion of yourself, of your own rather, you just go with the flow. People tend to toss you to and fro. Yeah, I think that's the word. People tend to toss you to and fro. You don't have an opinion of yourself. You don't make decisions for yourself because you just feel you don't have the ability to make good decisions, and then feeling embarrassed to ask for help from your partner, because you feel they might judge you. And just the list goes on and on. Fear of failure, you don't want to try new things because you don't want to fail at it. Yeah, please, we can move to the next slide. And then quite a number of things can cause poor self-image: one's background, social media, people's opinion about yourself, bad experiences, bad relationships. For someone who has dealt with abuse, not just in love relationship, because there are people who are abused by family members. It's a form of relationship, but they experienced abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. And this thing, it has a way of playing. People that abuse others, they have a way of playing with people's mind, such that those people that are victims, they don't see themselves in a good light. And then implications. What are now the implications of this fear? I think I've talked about this: fear about life, fear about things. Please, we can move to the next slide. Fear about things that really don't exist. You tend to insinuate things. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if I don't make it? Self-doubt, self-condemnation, depression. And this depression, it has a lot of impact in relationship, in the sense that people that are depressed, they don't want to be depressed alone. When you're depressed, you feel somehow when your partner is happy and going on with life like nothing is happening. You're like, I'm sad, and you're not sad. What's happening? It has a way of rubbing off on the next person, because if the next person doesn't want to hurt you, and especially when it becomes too consistent, and then everywhere looks all gloomy and moody and stuff like that. Yeah. And then insecurity about one's look, insecurity. And the thing about this insecurity is that and that's the unfortunate thing, it can be transferred, to one's partner, and even to the next generation, to one's children. There's a general study that if you don't deal with that particular insecurity, it's many times can be inherited. The fears, the insecurity, limitations can be inherited by, one's children. So if you don't deal with it, this may become a difficulty or a challenge for your children to go through. So with all this being said, please, you can move to the next slide. With all this being said, what is the solution? There are generally prescribed solution for low self-image or poor self-image. by default, you would think, oh, the solution to poor self-image is to have a good self-image, but it's much more than that. You assume that, oh, all you need to do is just have a good self-image of yourself. It's much more than that. For instance, if I don't like my finger and I want it to look good, one of the things that I can do is probably make some alterations, maybe plastic surgery, as the case may be, but it doesn't really change my identity in that sense. Because in a bid, now I'm not saying, because there are times that plastic surgery is needed medically, and it's advised medically. But when you're doing it in a bid to change a body part so you can look good or you can look better, because a lot of people say things like, oh, my nose is limiting me in life because it's too big, then it's chasing all the potential men away. Then I have to adjust the nose so all the potential men can come to me. People say stuff like that, but at the end of the day, the person gets, I don't want to say you now, the person gets trapped in the loop, in the cycle of, okay, after I change the nose, there's something else to change, even medically, people that do plastic surgery, they have to go back to have so many sessions, and it's just so exhausting. And at the end of the day, the real problem is not fixed. It's not fixed. Now, I'm not saying one should settle for mediocrity. If there's things to be changed, yes, you can. For instance, if you want to keep fit, you can. But if it is done in a bid, to probably change your identity or something, it makes things worse than better. And then one of the general prescribed solution, positive self-affirmation. Now, I'm not saying it's not good to affirm yourself positively, but the issue, please, we are seeing this slide, but the issue most times is, from what standpoint are you affirming yourself? Because talk is cheap. They are quite, if it's to find things positive to say about yourself, you can go on YouTube and you will get a lot of things, and you will keep saying it. But from what standpoint are you saying it from? I'm going to talk a little about this as we go on. And then some of the prescribed solution for poor self-image is, get a partner, a romantic partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, as the case may be, to affirm you, to appeal as a man, maybe to appeal to your ego, and just quite a number of things. Some people are desperate, to get into a relationship because they just want that affirmation. They want to feel among, but really it doesn't really solve the issue, because for someone who has a low self-image, getting into a relationship will even make it more obvious that this person has a lot to deal with. So now, what is the real solution to this? Please, you can move to the next slide. The real issue here, like I said initially, is a question of identity, and identity cannot be built. Identity cannot be built on physical attributes. It cannot be built on physical attributes, and that's why if you say you want to make some alterations, in your body to make yourself look good, it still doesn't affect your identity. So first you need to know what God's original identity for you is, and you live life from that standpoint. This in itself will avoid a lot of struggle. It will avoid a lot of comparison. You need to know who you are. Know who you are, know whose you are. That in itself, when you know your purpose, this is just a question of purpose. When you know your purpose, life becomes easy for you. Discover yourself, discover who you are, discover what you are meant to do in life. Then you don't get to struggle for another person. For instance, a chair is created, for the purpose for people to sit on. If a chair is saying, oh, I want to be a table, the chair will go through struggle. The chair will struggle a lot, because the main purpose for that chair is to be a chair. Now, even if the chair tries to make some alterations in its body, in its structure, just to look like a table, it still doesn't change the fact that it's a chair. That's the real identity. And that's what I was talking about. What happens is that the chair just keeps struggling, and yet it still doesn't change that identity that it's a chair. So the best thing to do is to accept that identity, find out that identity, accept the identity, and live from that standpoint, And it's important to know this before actually going into a relationship, because you don't get to depend on someone to assure you, to make you feel among. As much as it's good for your partner to affirm you, yes, I like it when my husband affirms me, when my husband says sweet words to me, but if it doesn't come, it shouldn't make me depressed. I should be so confident in who God has made me, that when it comes from my husband, it's just an icing on the cake in that sense, So no matter what you're busy doing in life, no matter how happy you make people be, if it's not in line with your purpose, you won't feel fulfilled or satisfied in life, And then the second thing is to look to God, look into his word, To have an image of yourself, you have to look into something. For instance, if I want to check if my hair looks nice, or if I want to check if there's something in my hair, I have to look into a mirror. So I have to look into something to have an image of myself. Now, to have the God kind of image of yourself, you have to look into God. Image is always dependent on perspective, because if, for instance, if I find a mirror and it's broken, or it's just somehow, I don't know if you've seen those kind of mirror that when you see your face looks somehow and somehow, it doesn't give you that correct perspective that you want to see, or it doesn't give you the correct perspective of your face or of your body, So that's why it's important to have God as your perspective, because it gives the correct perspective of who you are. His word gives you the correct perspective of who you are. And then there's a scripture that says, that's 2 Corinthians 3 verse 8. It says, when you beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord are changed into the same image, but we all with open face, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord. So you are beholding God as if you are beholding into a glass, and then you are changed into whatever you're seeing, And how do you behold him? You behold him by looking, by looking into his word. So when you look into his word, then you have the God image, where you don't have to compare yourself with the standard of men, because a good self-image, really, it's dependent on the standard of men. There is still a form of comparison in that sense. For instance, if you want to do a plastic surgery, there's usually a template to follow, comparison with size. If I want to change my nose, there's a size I will compare with to show that, oh, this is the size I want. Or maybe comparison with race, comparison with a gender. You're seeing people who change their gender nowadays, because they feel, oh, the real gender they have is not good enough for them. There's usually a comparison, which is distorted, is distorted. It's the standard of men is not the perfect standard to look into. All right, and then confidence in who God made you, and we can see from Hebrews 10:35 to 36. Says you should not throw away your confidence, because it has a great reward. You will be richly rewarded when you have confidence in who God made you, But my question is, where is your confidence? Where is your confidence? Is it in who God made you? I've talked about looking into God, looking into his word. When you now find out, who God has made you, for instance, generally, there's a general, who God has made you. He has made you in his image, and specific to you in terms of your personal purpose. When you find out those things, how much confidence do you have in it? Okay, so I need to rush through. Then please, you can move to the next slide. How do we define, you can move to the next slide, please, after this. How do we define God image? God image simply is a confidence you have in who God says you are. Remember I said self has a lot of limitations, and it has the tendency to be compared with other selves. So the best image to have is that of God. Image is, in such that you have confidence in who it says you have. And this won't be dependent on your abilities. It won't be dependent on the standard of men. For instance, God says you are made in the image of God. God says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Do you believe this word? I want you to type it in the chat box. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Do you believe these words? And make it an habit to say it and reassure yourself with those words written concerning you. Reassure yourself. So surround yourself with people that remind you of those words, that assure you of those words. These are practical solutions I'm giving to having a poor self-image. Remember, I said it's not just having a good image, but it's much more. It's having a God image. Well, the thing is, I'm not trying to go outside the reality of things. Almost everybody has something that they are not very proud of. It could be little as, or maybe my index finger is too small or too tiny. It could be the way you talk. It could be a part of your body. The emphasis of loving yourself is not about accepting mediocrity now. It's about accepting a low standard about yourself. And it's not about not taking care of yourself, but rather it's about discovering your real identity and living from that perspective. Now, there are three examples of people I want to talk about. 3 or 4. There are some people in the Bible. I want to share a story of first person, Moses. He had a low self-image of himself. God wanted him to deliver the people of Israel from slavery, from the Egyptians, from Pharaoh, but he argued with God. Was saying, "Oh, he can't speak," and God kept weird. That's one of the things that even touched me with this. Please, we can move to the next slide. If you really want to go through it, is in Exodus 3. And that was one of the things that really caught my attention with this. He kept arguing with God that he cannot speak, that he stammers, and God kept reassuring him. That's how much God cares about the image you have of yourself. God kept reassuring, I will be with you. I will be with you. I will be with you. So it's really, really important that even as God is reassuring you, you are assuring yourself of what he says about you. It felt totally inadequate, but eventually led the people of Israel, and he did so many miracles even on their way as he was leading them out of Egypt. And then next person I want to talk about is Gideon. God called him the mighty man of valor, but he said no. He's a weak person. He said, I am too weak. In fact, that he is the least in his family. In other sense, he's the last born in his family. For people that are last born, that they feel, I'm the last born, then I cannot speak. He said he's the last born, he's the last in his clan, he's the weakest, and so on and so forth. But God also kept reassuring him. He said he will save the people of Israel, and he eventually did great and mighty things. So the question now is, that area of weakness or that thing that you feel you want to change about yourself, what if God wants to use it for something bigger? Because most of these people now, if you go to Jeremiah 2, he was also a man who God said he was a prophet, but he said no, he cannot speak, and he just kept making a lot of complaint, but God also reassured him That means their most of them, their point of weakness, God had great plans and purpose for it. So look beyond that weakness, look beyond the poor self-image you have about yourself, and see a greater time, a greater purpose, a greater plan, for it. And lastly, I want to talk about myself personally. My background had a lot of major impact on me. It has a lot of major impact on how I perceive myself. In fact, for many years, I told myself that I wasn't going to get married because of what I saw in my family, because of what I saw between my parents, because there was just this fear of repeating the same events that happened with my parents. I was angry at the institution of marriage, angry with me. I probably felt I didn't deserve to be married. And the truth is, as long as you keep defining yourself based on your past experiences, you might keep limiting yourself, But with time, I found out that God wanted me to be married. To cut the long story short, God wanted me to be married, and even to be happily married, not just married, And I believed this, and I lived life from this perspective. And of course, God has blessed me with a very, very amazing husband, we are happily married and fulfilling God's purpose together. So I put it out to you. I don't know, the image you have of yourself. I don't know if you're out there and you've put a lot of limitations on your life because you really don't have so much value for yourself. You just feel there's nothing good about yourself. I want you to believe what God says about you and start living from that perspective. Believe what God says about you, live from that perspective and look beyond the experience. See the possibility of living life the way God ordained it for you to be. Your limitations, your shortcomings notwithstanding, Yeah, so that's all I want to talk about. I don't know how it has touched you. You can do well to drop your questions if you have questions. And you can also drop your lessons in the chat box if you learned anything. Thank you, MC. I'm sorry for the time. I hand over to you, please.
You are forgiven. You are forgiven because of the amazing word you just shared with us. Thank you so much, Mrs. V. We really appreciate the word. And like you said, questions we have received, you can still stay with us because I have received a couple questions, but because of time, I'm going to ask you just some of them. Our audience is, one of the questions was, when you mentioned on your, on one of the first slides, you spoke about jealousy, right? So the question goes like this: is jealousy a necessary evil in a relationship? Because some women, if the guy is not jealousy, they think the guy does not love them. Even God himself, I saw you quote scripture a lot. So even God himself, he said, I'm a jealous God. So is jealousy a necessary evil in a relationship?
Okay, I think I saw someone's comment saying good jealousy. There is a kind. I think I'll take it from that standpoint. There's a kind of jealousy that I believe stems from insecurity. Like I said, is not a good thing, But I don't really think jealousy is a necessary thing in that sense in a relationship, because the fruit of being jealous is not good in that sense. The question is, what comes up after that jealousy? What comes up? Is it that you start confronting your spouse, or you start confronting or you start nurturing the thoughts in your heart, thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. That's why she keeps talking to this guy. Or, instead of just talking about it respectfully and not abusing the next person. A lot of time, most especially for men, if a man is jealous, I've heard of people who keep their husband in the house, or their wives, they stop their wives from going out because of jealousy. It's much more than the jealousy. It's actually insecurity. They just don't want their wife to mix up with people, to relate with people, because they feel they're afraid that their wife will go out with someone else or fall in love with someone else. They are not confident about the relationship they have with their wife, or even their own self-value and self-worth. And we can't compare jealousy as it relates to man with jealousy as it relates to God. God is God, you are not God. God is God, you're not God. So I think that's my response. I don't know if Mr. P would like to add something else.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll just ask one more question that I received. That's going to be the last one. The question goes, to you, what's your ideal day, or what's your ideal routine of someone practicing self-love in your own way? What do you think?
Ideal routine, in what sense?
Yeah, like what am I supposed to do? I work to show that I have self-love. What some of the small things I can just do that shows self-love?
Okay. I guess I should use myself as an example. My routine. Yes, my routine, first of all, is to wake up, pray personally, say some personal confessions. You remember I said something about, speaking what God said about you, reassuring yourself about what God says about you. Say my personal confessions, and then pray with my husband as well. And we also say the family confessions. And then we go on to our daily activities like studying, and then when you discover what you're here for, in terms of your purpose, that should translate into your everyday routine. I think that's another thing, because it's not just enough to know that, oh, this is my purpose, and then you keep saying it to yourself, and then you don't do anything about it. You keep saying it to yourself, but you don't have practical things you're doing regarding it. If it's going to school at this point in time, yes, do the necessary study you need to do. Yeah, so that's just it in summary. I hope I've been able to answer the question.
Yeah, you answered it perfectly. Thank you again, once again. Thank you so much for your words. We are really, really honored to have you. Thank you so much. So to those who have just joined us, this was Mrs. V, the one with the spark for Mr. V. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed it.
And if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comment section.
This will actually help us reach more people through this YouTube channel.
All right. Don't forget,
love is light.
When you're walking in love, you're walking in light.
So
keep spreading love.
Yes.
Bye. See you in the next video.